and welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Jonelle.
And I'm Karen. We're your co-hosts here to create space for honest, open, and sometimes messy conversations about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by cultural bias and privilege. So, Jonelle, how was your week? How did you do with our challenge or call to action that you gave us last week? We listen, but we don't judge.
Well, we're going to see today because we're going to do a couple examples. I hope the listeners did well with the challenge. Again, it's meant to just find a safe space within your own community. Find someone who you trust to kind of give some private information to, or maybe some like embarrassing thoughts about your biases in life. So, yeah. Do you want me to kick it off with?
Yeah, you kick it off.
And we don't judge. Okay. So mine is, I have to confess, it's kind of like a twofold thing. So sometimes when I don't know people's names, I kind of like mumble their names. This is not my confession. I do the same thing with pronouns and races. Like there was a period of time where Black, African American, I was embarrassed to be wrong. And so I kind of would mumble assumptions instead of asking about assumptions. So that's we listen and we don't judge.
I'm not going to judge that one at all
We're
because
supposed to judge in
yeah,
general.
that's right.
That's the whole purpose of this. I'm confessing something private. That's embarrassing to me and I wanted to share. So yeah, that's the whole point. We listen and we don't judge.
Oh my gosh. So I was going to give another story, but I'm just going to give this because responding to what you said, I didn't realize how everything I hear, I judge immediately.
Oh, that's an interesting take. I mean, to be honest, I'm not that surprised. I know you will.
Well, I am a Libra. A Libra is all about balancing and judging. That were the scales. I'll never forget, one of my students once did a video of me critiquing a Picasso. Like I'm always judging things. So anyways, that's so interesting. I'm going to confess that the way I listen always has a component of weighing things out.
Interesting. But not judgmental in a negative way.
No.
Just you're weighing things out.
No, not. And I think that this is actually interesting when we're using the word judgmental. Like that's kind of leads into this week, actually, how these are just words, and we've created meaning around the words.
Substance.
Like I'm a teacher and I teach art and design, and we use the word critique a lot because that's what we do in our profession. And I'm always telling the students that the word critique isn't meant to be critical. It's meant to be evaluative. So anyways, but that's so funny because the minute I listened to you, I didn't mean to judge, but I was weighing it out in my head as a judgment.
Yeah. So is that your listen? So we listen and we don't judge.
We listen. I'm not going to judge myself.
But we listen and...
Well, maybe it's listening and learning.
Yeah.
I just didn't even think about it. I didn't think about that's a way that I go through a system of listening.
Yeah.
So to all my friends out there, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be listening and judging you immediately, but I guess that's how I weigh things out. So I'm going to just try to listen to listen.
Listen to listen. I love that. We listen and we don't judge.
Yeah. Huh.
So is that or did you want to do the other?
No. No, this is perfect. That was exposing to me enough. Big time. Hey, so we today decided that we were going to do a theme. And but before we do this theme, I wanted to do another kind of evaluation or insight or reflection on something that you said last week. When you were talking about Black Lives Matter and you were talking about the example of a house burning down, I was having still a little bit like wrapping my head around that concept. What does it mean that you were saying it's like a house burning down. It's like a crisis. And so I started to think about a crisis I was in. So, as you know, a year ago, my mother passed away. And during my mother, your grandmother, during that time, one of the words that was triggering to me was the word self-care. Like, because I just wanted to be with my mom all the time while she was sick, and I didn't really worry about self-care. It wasn't something. And so when someone would say that, I wasn't neutral about it. It would spark something in me. And I was thinking about this conversation that you had about the house burning down. And then the other person said, hey, look at my house too. I want to be really apologetic in the sense that we are adding a pretty casual tone to this conversation. And I understand that people who have been doing this work are completely affected by race inequities in this world, are going to view me as like the person, quote unquote, saying, while my mother was dying, Karen, you need self-care. So I don't know if I'm syncing my connections well, but this is a huge apology, because part of why we're doing this in this tone, and it's a tone that's not shame-provoking, is we really want white women to have this conversation. We want white women, as you and I are white women, to really talk about our cultural biases and things that wake up. So I understand that this tone to someone else in a crisis may really trigger them. And I don't know what else to do. I want to just simply acknowledge that this conversation for Black people may be really triggering, or anyone that's experiencing a marginalized situation because of inequities. And yet, I also want to open up this conversation to us as white women so that we can really talk about it. So anyways, it was just I put those connections together last week when you talked about the house burning down, and I wanted to just make that statement. Did that make sense?
I mean, to me, it made total sense. I think that's a really great reflection and a great thing to remind our audience. We've told everyone we are not experts on things. We are here to learn. We are here to grow. But I also think recognizing, too, that we did intentionally bring a casual tone to this two tough subjects. And so, yeah, recognizing that too, and acknowledging to that we don't think it's a casual conversation. We don't think this is a casual topic, but we understand to hopefully bridge the conversations, we had to make it more approachable, or that's our hope, to make it more approachable. But I think that is very fair to acknowledge that could be very triggering to a lot of people.
Yeah, thanks. So anyways, we want to acknowledge that. If this triggers, if this doesn't allow you to be in the conversation, we get it. And our goal is to have us be able to have a conversation around this. So speaking of which, today we thought we would do the theme of words that trigger, or
things that trigger us.
Things
in general,
that trigger.
Things that trigger.
Yeah. So I'm taking it. You might be taking it from a different standpoint. I'm taking it more from maybe where I was at before I did a lot of this conversation. And so words that I know that I maybe felt uncomfortable around. So trigger might be actually like too big of a word, but it's still something that it kind of, it ignites us to something.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to start, or if you want me to start, go for it.
I did take a slightly different approach than when you're going, so I can kind of dig in and then we can turn back to you. So when we talked the other day about things that are trigger words, I realized I have never come from a standpoint of feeling triggered by being called out by things. So where stuff you might bring up that you were triggered, that is not something that resonates me. I am a very curious and open person. So when someone's called me out on something, I usually am like, oh, why? And so I just sit into like, but what does trigger me? Because trust me, I'm not perfect. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I'm at peace and I'm not triggered by anything, because that's
Can
not
I
true.
interrupt you?
Yeah.
You just said a word that kind of triggered me.
Oh, what did I
So
say?
you said the word open. It's interesting because what triggers, so when I hear the word open now, I'm inferring that you mean I'm closed. So this is what is challenging about the word trigger, because you aren't necessarily inferring that I'm closed. You're just saying that you're just using the word open as a way to describe your perspective. So this is a good example of like, we get into these conversations and someone says a word that we infer its meaning, or we take personal its meaning.
Well, I think that's an amazing, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, that's totally the point of trigger words, is often they are so well-meaning by people that's not, but we take our own interpretation of them, we spin them, and we personalize them to ourselves instead of kind of coming to see where the other person is coming from. So anyways, I sat and really kind of thought, what triggers me, especially in these conversations? And what I've realized what triggers me are close friends and family who I feel, and I don't even want to say like that I have different opinions from, because I can do that. We all have to do that. But I do notice in life that like it's so interesting. The people that trigger me the most are, family and friends who don't necessarily share my opinion. And it's so interesting how like frustrated and triggered I can get. And it feels so silly because I am so open to so many perspectives outside of my world and books and reading and different concepts. But when it's someone close to me, there's something that I want them to almost be like the same reflection of me, as if we like are on the same page. And so I find this so often. There's a couple people in my life in particular, and they know who they are, is we will get in conversations and I feel like we hit a snag in the sense that, oh, we're not aligned. And I really struggle to maintain my cool with them. And I could do this with a stranger all day long and have a great in-depth conversation around differences in different beliefs, from political beliefs, race belief, anything of the above. But when it comes to family members, I find that's where I get triggered. It's so hard. And so mine is not words, mine is perspectives of people close to me.
Shared values.
Shared values. And it's not that we don't share so many of the same values. And I think this is why I'm always like so surprised when then there's a topic that we're so off on. And so that is something I'm working on a lot right now.
So this is interesting because as I sat and listened to you, I thought
Without
about
judgment.
Oh, gosh, I don't know if I can do that. But I thought a little bit about like this idea of shared value. So I'm going to take it to a completely different story. Let's say you're at a store and you and I, we like to shop. So let's say we're shopping and you and I both go, which rarely ever happens. We have very different taste in clothing, but we both go to the same shirt and we love it. And we're really, really excited because we love it. Okay, so that's excitement. I wonder if that's the same. So I'm going to keep going on with this story. I wonder if that's the same excitement when we feel like we're in the groove of a shared opinion. Ooh. Secondly, though, let's keep this shopping metaphor. We're still shopping. And I see a pair of pants that I really like and you don't like. But you'll usually tell me why. There usually is kind of like, Mom, that striping doesn't really show off your figure or something like that. You'll actually, there will be a discourse or a dialogue. And I might say, okay, I agree with you. Or I might say, no, I'm going to still go ahead and get these pants anyways. But we don't walk away hating each other. We walk away going, oh, that's part of the dialogue. That's part of the conversation. It's just is, right? I wonder, can we do that when it comes to these kind of values that we're putting on these kind of constructions? So I don't know. I just, again, I'm not an expert. Anyways, as I heard you, I thought, we like shared values, and yet in other contexts, we're comfortable with this diverse opinion.
I was about to say that is a tricky thing to ask for, to always have shared values, because I really genuinely love diverse opinions. I think diverse perspectives are what moves the world in great, innovative ways, and we need to continue diverse perspectives. It's just really hard and triggering sometimes when people close to you don't have the same, and so bridging those conversations. And so I think, anyways, that was my trigger. We can move to some of your triggers, but I think this is also why we're trying to share this conversation with you, because I am sure I'm not alone there with family being triggering, and family and close friends it's hard to have tough conversations with. So,
and I do think it's interesting when you started the original conversation and you used a word that triggered me immediately. I mean, that was the first sentence. Immediately, I got a little defensive. And so, we're kind of forced into the situation to have this conversation right now because we're doing this podcast. But if we weren't, I think I would have kind of walked away. So I don't know. I would have felt like you were being judgmental, and I might have not stayed in it. So this is something to think about as we use our words. Triggering is often something that's more of a self-responsive reflection. Can we have the courage to stay in it and to kind of maybe I hate the word unpack, but I use it a lot in this dialogue, but unpack what these triggering words mean to us. Okay. So I took it from more of a conversation around race, culture, evaluation, that sort of thing. And I started thinking about what words are actually like triggering us. And so one of the first words is, it's in our title. We know when we say the word white women, there's a trigger. We're getting it left and right when we tell people about this podcast. That word white, or the word black, or the word brown, when it's used as an adjective next to the word of the person, like woman, or it's not thought of as weird with a dog, like white dogs or brown dogs, but it is weird. We are uncomfortable with the word white women when it's used in that noun structure.
Can I go back to unpacking the comparison to the dog?
Wrong comparison. Because we're not dogs. Okay,
we're not dogs. Right. There's not a systematic, racist thousands of years.
Exactly. But this is the point that
that's a rough analogy.
But no, in some way, this is the point that you're making is there's so much embedded in those words together that white and women, black women, there's so much embedded in that meaning that really, truly, it's all culturally embedded. And so we want us to start being comfortable simply with words. Like when you use the word open, I need to just be okay with you using that word instead of me embedding all this meaning. So white women, I know that that's a triggering word. And so I want us to try to figure out how we can use it and use it without, just use it more comfortably.
Well, I don't think it's about figuring out how to use it. I think it's understanding and embracing why we're using it.
Yeah.
And so, because a lot of people have asked us, why are you not called all women wake up or just women wake up? Why is it calling out white women? And I hope we've touched on this before, but really it's because white women are our culture. White women are our responsibility as white women to educate us, to help each other grow, to help each other unlearn biases in a shame-free environment. And so this is why our call is to white women. It doesn't mean other people can't listen. It certainly doesn't mean we're not getting feedback from other people. It just means we know in our group of community, we have a lot of work to do. and we are each other's peers. And so we have the ability to speak to each other as peers.
So what we're doing is we're using the language white as an adjective for women. We're asking a specific set of women to be engaged in this conversation.
Yeah.
So the word, what I'm trying to get at is the word white, women. Yes, we're bringing a lot of energy and value around it, but it's really just an adjective towards women.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm trying to get here is like, can we look at these trigger words and see them as words and actually just being able to have these conversations with specific words. And these words, it is helpful to use the word white women, right? It's helpful. Okay, so that's one. The other word is the word bias. So it's kind of weird because, not weird, all these words we're having to use to describe what we're into or talking about, we have to use them because they actually, the meaning makes sense, and yet these words are triggering, right? So, for example, bias isn't always a negative word. Bias is an inclination towards something. So, for example, I'm biased towards the color yellow. I love yellow. If you put yellow in my life, I would always be happy. And I like orange too. I have a bias towards the warm color palette, okay? Why in that context is the word bias neutral? And yet when we're having this conversation about, culture and race and feminism, the word bias is a trigger. And so I'm trying to have us, because in some ways we have to use that word. So yes, I have biases that are negative, that are prejudiced, that can be harmful because I haven't analyzed my biases. And yet the word bias can also be a neutral word.
I think you're sparking something in me too that you're kind of continuing to talk about here is so much of these words are built by our own historical context. And so we all come from a different context. We all have come from a different location, as you talked about in a previous podcast. And so we do bring different meanings to these words. And so I think in the same sense that I know another word we're going to talk about is the word racist or racism.
Yeah.
And so where that word might trigger, white people, but think about there's also a ton of words that white people say that might trigger people of color that wouldn't even contextually make sense for white people to be triggered by. And so I do think that is, again, it's going back to this, it really is a self perspective thing. And if we take the time to look outside of our self perspective, we hopefully can find a more neutral meaning to the word, or a more, not even neutral, just a more effective meaning, or what is the word I'm looking for? Just basically a meaning that helps us grow.
Yeah, because it's really hard to have these conversations without using the word bias. It's like I'm trying to figure out a word that, another word, let me say I'm biased, but we're trying to have conversations that do include these words that are triggering. And maybe the call to action is to do some self-reflection on having the courage to sit in with these words.
Or why do these words trigger you? Self-reflection on just words. Yeah, why do these words
because words matter.
You?
So the racism, that's another one. So for example, I understand that if someone calls you a racist, it will trigger you. It would trigger me. And yet the reality is, I am a racist. It's as I just said, one of my judge and not is judging. We are all racism means is putting an evaluation on the culture of race. It's about thinking about race. It's about it's about having dialogue around around race and race as a culture or race as a phenomena.
Can I add to that? Because
Yeah.
I do think you're making that word a little too neutral. I understand that all white people are racist. I mean,
all people are racist.
Yeah.
Black people, brown people.
I do want to say, I think you're making that a little too neutral because I think racism is a spectrum. And I think, yes, as a core, you could say it's about evaluating a race.
Yeah.
But I think why the word racism is hard is because it is a spectrum of hate. And so even though a lot of the evaluation can be a hate towards another race.
Okay.
But I'm clarifying this distinction because I think when we say the term and people will hear this, everyone is racist. We're not saying that everyone is on the spectrum of hate. We're saying that everyone is on the spectrum of evaluation.
Yeah.
But I think but I also wanted to acknowledge that racism is an evaluation of hate.
Got it. Well, anyways, I think it's hard because we're assuming maybe it's the you are words too. Like someone the other day called you rude. They didn't say your behavior was rude. They said you are rude.
Yeah.
And that was really shocking.
It was shocking.
It was shocking. Maybe if they said your behavior is racist versus you are racist, we would take it differently because I know I have racist behavior at times. I know I have a prejudice against people at times, or I judge people.
See, I still think that's simplifying it. I mean, I get what you're saying there. Like, no one wants to be called out and identified that as like holistically who you are versus what you're acting on. But I still think like I want to be honest with people and unpack that I can see why being called a racist is scary. But also I think the first step in like understanding the world around us that we live in is that identifying that we're all racist.
Yeah.
We all have some sort of inherited perceptions of different race. And again, it's a spectrum. I'm not saying I think most people are so hated, like so hate-filled with racism, but there's definitely people who are going to see a person of color and move to the other side of the street. Or even if you're well-meaning, your first reaction might be, oh God, am I in a safe neighborhood kind of thing. And you'll keep those thoughts to yourself because in the scheme of things, you actually don't mean that. But that could be an inherent initial reaction. And so that's why we're kind of still saying there's a part of everyone that still is racist.
Yeah. So anyways, it's a triggering word. We understand it's a triggering word. And yet part of our conversation that we're to be having, or we're trying to have this dialogue, is that word is probably going to be part of the lexicon of this conversation. So, oh my gosh, we are up for time. And yet there's so many other things that I want to talk about. So I guess today, just summarizing words like white, that are color adjectives, words like bias, words like race or racism, or even Jonelle's word open, do trigger us. And yet what we realize is the trigger is it's triggering something in our bodies that we're reflecting on
Our
this.
internal perspective.
And it probably has a lot to do with in culture that's embedded in us that we perceive things. And yet we're trying to, I know you're saying let's not neutralize it because these are not neutral words, but we won't be able to even have the conversations. We will trigger each other when we have to use these words in our conversation. I want us to realize that these are just still words. It's like the attitude. Feelings are feeling. I know.
I think what I'm trying to say, because I don't necessarily agree with you there. I'm trying to say we don't need to neutralize it to have a conversation. We need to discuss it. We need to have an aligned definition. We need everyone to understand what it is, and then we can have the discussion. Because I think no matter what, people are going to be triggered by it. And if you neutralize it, other people are going to be very hurt and offended by it. And so I think it's just more about having the definition, acknowledging that it's there, and again, acknowledging the spectrums of these words.
So, okay, let me ask you about the spectrum then of race, racism, and racist. So when you talk about and maybe that's my problem, is I'm mixing those three up. So when we talk about race, we're talking about kind of a generality. We're talking also, like, one of the things is there is no race is a made up phenomena to classify people, right? So we've classified people within these races. Racism is when we begin to put maybe, and I'm making this definition up on myself. So listeners, please help us.
That's what's starting to concern me.
So no. But racism. So race is a phenomenon of classification. Racism is when we take the phenomena of the classification and we begin to add value to it, whether it's good or bad. It's a subject that has value. Racist, if I'm kind of unpacking this more, it's related to an individual. It's related to a general dialogue.
I mean, I would say I agree with you on race. That is an identifying factor. I think racism is the action and the thought, and then racist, you're right, is the adjective towards the person.
Yeah.
I think both racism and racist can't ever be neutral, are still spectrums of perspective. And it's a hateful spectrum.
Often it's a hate. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
not often.
Is.
The whole spectrum is hateful. I mean, the whole spectrum is built out of misunderstanding and then can gear towards hate kind of thing. I'm not saying the beginning of the spectrum is hate. The beginning of the spectrum is misunderstanding or different in context, and you're making judgment. And that's where I think you're seeing it as neutral. Is it's neutral. It's well-intentioned, like neutral at the beginning of the spectrum. It's just like well,
I appreciate your perspective because,
but it is.
You're right. It's the more I hear you, it's not neutral, and
but we do have to acknowledge the word.
But we have to acknowledge that all of us have biases.
Yeah,
and those biases perpetuate racism and racist thinking, and so we need to kind of unpack our biases and look at our biases so they don't move into racist perspective.
I think that's fair. So there's so much more to touch. We will explore many more trigger words on our blog. So please go and follow up and look at our blog later.
Janelle, thank you for this conversation because you listen to me and I'm just trying to...
And we don't judge.
So we're listening and learn. So maybe the challenge for us is to just simply look at where we're biased, and using the word biased as the definition of inclination towards, not positive or negative, but where are we biased in our perspectives?
I think that's a good ask for some listeners. I think for some listeners, really even recognizing biases is going to take some kind of chipping away. So I would first say, just start to acknowledge where you're triggered, like what words trigger you, what spaces trigger you, and then start to unpack that. Like, why are you triggered?
Yeah.
And stuff. And kind of, do some deep digging there. Reach out to us. We love to talk to people. We will respond to you. We'll, have a dialogue. So or talk to someone you're close with. We just want to open the conversation for people. But this was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparked some reflection and inspired you to engage with the world in a new and more thoughtful way. Remember, this journey is as much about learning, unlearning, and showing up authentically. If you like this episode, please sure to subscribe, leave a review, connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and keep waking up.
Bye.